Ladies and gentlemen, what happens when we die? That question has haunted the human mind for millennia, echoing through temples, whispered in hospitals, pondered in silent bedrooms at night. Yet the question itself contains a peculiar flaw. It assumes that you are something separate from life, that death is some foreign country your soul will travel to, and that there must be something after it. But let us start, not with death, but with birth. You came into this world from where? From your mother's womb, yes, but go deeper. From silence, from non-existence. Before you were born, you have no memory, no name, no body. You did not worry, you did not strive, and you certainly did not fear death. You simply weren't, and still, here you are, living, breathing, experiencing. A miracle of consciousness has bloomed from apparent nothingness. So why should death be any different? You see, death is not the opposite of life. Death is the opposite of birth. Life has no opposite. Life is the constant. Life is the dance of energy, the pulse of atoms, the flowing of rivers and the spinning of stars. Life never ends. It only changes form. The drop falls into the ocean, not to vanish, but to become the sea. You do not fear going to sleep at night, not really, because you trust that you will wake. And even on the nights when dreams are absent and time disappears, there is no terror, no resistance, only rest. Now, imagine death is like that. The deepest sleep you've ever had, without fear, without ego, without identity. But still, some will ask, what about me? What about my personality, my memories, my story? Ah, the story. The beautiful illusion that we are each a separate self, walking around in a skin bag, looking out of two little windows called eyes, talking to others who are just as separate. But this is the grand joke. You are not in the universe, you are the universe, experiencing itself in one particular form. Like a wave rising from the ocean, riding its moment, and returning, not lost, but reabsorbed. When the wave returns to the ocean, is it gone, or is it more whole than it ever was? In death, the ego falls away, and what remains is not nothing, but everything. The separation dissolves, and you return to what you always were before you were born. The eternal, the nameless, the infinite mystery. No identity, no fear, just presence. Just being. We are not travelers passing through life. When we consider the idea that death is not the end, but merely a transformation of form, we are invited into a completely different relationship with life and mortality. Everything in the natural world transforms. The seed becomes a tree, the tree falls and becomes part of the soil, and from that soil new life grows. The rain becomes a river, the river becomes ocean mist, and the mist returns as rain again. Not once does nature treat any form as permanent. Everything flows, everything moves. Death, therefore, is not a break in the system. It is part of the movement itself. It is a continuation, not a termination. In the same way, what we call ourselves is also a movement, a process, not a fixed thing. The body changes constantly. Cells die and are replaced. Thoughts shift moment to moment. Emotions rise and fall. Nothing about us is static, so when the body reaches its final moment and ceases to operate, it is not an end to you in the way we fear. It is a change in the pattern, a shift in form. Like ice melting into water, water evaporating, and the energy that was you does not stop being. It simply changes how it expresses itself. Even modern physics echoes this in its understanding that energy cannot be created or destroyed, it only changes form. What you are fundamentally is not a name or a history or a role in society. You are a field of energy, a flow of awareness, temporarily organized into the form you call your life. And when that form dissolves, the energy does not vanish. It returns, it reabsorbs, it merges. Just as the wave is not lost when it crashes, it becomes part of the sea again, no less real, just less separate. To believe that death is a final disappearance is to misunderstand the nature of reality. Nothing disappears, nothing is wasted. Death is simply the part of life where the boundaries dissolve and the illusion of separateness fades. What you took to be you may fall away, like a costume removed at the end of a play, but what was wearing that costume, what was aware, what was alive, returns to its original nature, beyond any single identity. This perspective softens the fear of death. It opens the door to a kind of peace, a kind of trust in the rhythm of existence. After all, did you suffer before you were born? Were you anxious before you existed? No. There was simply nothingness, or better said, everythingness without distinction. Death returns us to that timeless place, the womb of the universe, where form is not needed and where stillness holds infinite potential. So perhaps death is not something to run from, but something to understand as part of the dance. Not the end of the song, but a pause between the notes. You are not merely your thoughts, your achievements, your possessions, or even your memories. Those are expressions, not essence. When they fall away, essence remains. And essence doesn't die, it returns, it becomes, it flows. And so will you. If we say life has no opposite, only birth and death do, we begin to loosen the grip of fear that death often holds over us. Most people imagine life and death as opposing forces, one being positive, the other negative. One light, the other dark. But this is a misunderstanding, born from the illusion that life is merely what happens between the moment we are born and the moment we die. This limited view treats life as something fragile and temporary, something bookended by beginning and end. But in reality, life is not a linear event with hard borders. It is a continuous unfolding. Birth and death are merely entrances and exits, gateways through which life flows. Birth is how life takes a particular form. Death is how that form dissolves. But the life itself, the energy, the consciousness, the awareness behind it is ever present. It doesn't begin at birth or end at death. That awareness existed before the form took shape and will continue after the form dissolves. A wave has a beginning and an end, yes, but water does not. The wave is an expression of water, not its entirety. In the same way, your life, your personality, your experiences, these are expressions of a much deeper, timeless flow of life. When you truly see this, your relationship with mortality changes. Death is no longer a thief, but a transformer. It is not the opposite of life, but the mirror of birth. Just as you were not afraid to be born, because there was no you yet to be afraid, so too there need not be fear in dying. You return to the same great silence you came from, a silence that is not absence, but the fertile space in which everything arises. If life had an opposite, it would suggest that life can be destroyed or replaced. But life is like the sky, ever present even when clouds pass across it. Thoughts come and go, bodies come and go, civilizations rise and fall, but the essence of being, the ever-aware, ever-present consciousness, remains unchanged. That is life. Not the biological machinery, not the narrative, but the mystery that makes all of it possible. To say life has no opposite is to recognize that what you are at your core is beyond the reach of death. It is to see that death only affects form, not being itself. Life is not something you have, it is something you are. And that which you are cannot be undone by an event like death. Just as music continues after one note ends, and light continues beyond the flicker of one flame, life continues through and beyond all transitions. It is the ongoing dance of becoming and unbecoming. So if you look closely, you'll find that death doesn't stand outside of life, it stands within it, as a sacred part of the whole. The belief that we are separate, individual selves, bounded by our skin, driven by our thoughts, possessing a name and history, is perhaps the most persistent illusion we live under. We walk around thinking, this is me, and everything else is not me. But where truly does you end and the world begin? You breathe in air that the trees exhale. You eat food that once grew from soil. Your body is made of the same carbon, calcium, and water that cycles through all life. Even your thoughts are shaped by language you didn't invent, by culture you didn't choose. In every way, what you call you is an expression of everything else. You are not a separate island. You are a wave in the ocean. The ego, that little voice in your head constantly narrating, judging, comparing, and fearing, is not your true self. It is a function, a tool, useful, but often mistaken for the whole. Like a mask worn in a play, it gives character and shape to your experience, but it is not the actor behind it. Most suffering arises when we identify too strongly with this mask. We think we are the voice in the head. We think we are the role. And so, when death approaches, it feels like a terrifying loss, because if the role ends, and we believe we are nothing beyond it, then death becomes annihilation. But step back. Observe the voice in your mind. Notice how thoughts arise and fall, how emotions come and go, how the body changes over time. Yet something remains aware of all this. A still, silent, witnessing presence. That awareness, that spacious being that simply is, that is your true self. It is not born, and it does not die. It was here before the thought I was formed. It will remain after the body returns to dust. In this light, death does not kill you, it simply peels away the mask. The illusion of separateness falls apart, and you return to the whole. Like a droplet of rain falling back into the ocean, you do not disappear, you become everything. The ego dissolves, but awareness continues. It may no longer carry your name or remember your story, but it will be no less real. It will simply be free. Free of form, free of boundary, free of fear. So the idea of a separate self is not only false, it is the root of our fear of death. If we understood that we are not isolated minds trapped in decaying bodies, but temporary expressions of a boundless eternal life, we would not fear the end. We would embrace it as the next step in a vast, mysterious dance. Death is not the enemy, it is the truth that reveals the illusion. And when that illusion falls away, what remains is not less of you, but more. Not emptiness, but fullness. Not a void, but home. There you were born, there was no name, no memory, no identity, no sense of I at all, and yet you emerged. Life happened, consciousness bloomed out of that great silent unknown, a being came into existence, with thoughts and sensations and dreams. But if you truly look back, you'll find that you didn't come from a place. You came out of everything, like a flower grows from the soil, or light radiates from a flame. So the idea that death must be different from birth is based on the illusion that we begin only when we arrive and we end only when we leave. But what if it's the same doorway, just seen from the other side? The state before birth and the state after death may be identical. We tend to fear death because we imagine it as a kind of blankness, a void, a vanishing into nothing. But that's only frightening because we imagine a self there experiencing the nothing. Yet before you were born, you didn't suffer in your non-existence. You weren't lost, you weren't missing, you weren't waiting to be born. You simply were not, and there was nothing disturbing about that. There was no one there to be disturbed. And yet from that apparent absence came something miraculous. Now think, if the same nothingness gave rise to you once, why assume it cannot do so again? Why should the mystery that birthed your consciousness be limited to a one-time event? You didn't know you were coming before you arrived, and you may not know what comes after. But perhaps that's the point. You're not supposed to be it as a concept. You are supposed to be it. What we call death may just be the return to that original formless state, not unconscious in a negative sense, but free of all limitation, free of tension, free of struggle, free of identity. The ego does not survive death, just as it did not precede birth. But the deep presence behind the ego, the awareness that observes all things, that is not bound by time. It was not born, and it cannot die. It is the stillness before you existed, and the stillness after you leave. We often imagine we are leaving something behind, but the truth is we are returning to the same vast, silent origin we came from, the place where time does not exist, where identity is irrelevant, where peace is not something gained, it simply is. And that is not something to fear. It is something so complete, so profoundly whole, that to try to describe it is to already be too late. Death may not be a full stop, but a comma, a pause, a resting note in the great music of existence. The song continues, but not in a way we can measure or predict. In the same way you trusted life to begin without your permission, you can trust death to unfold without your resistance. After all, if the unknown brought you into being once, why fear returning to it? The place before birth and the place after death may be one and the same, timeless, silent, boundless. And within that silence all of life rises and returns. Fear of death at its core is not about death itself. It's about the loss of identity. It is the ego that fears its own end. The body may ache and age, but the deepest suffering around mortality comes from the thought, I will no longer be me. This fear arises from a deep-rooted belief that our thoughts, memories, personality, achievements, and even pain define who we are. The ego clings to these things as if they are solid ground, but they are not. They are flowing water, constantly shifting, changing, and dissolving. And the more tightly we cling to them, the more afraid we are when we sense they're slipping away. But who are you, really? Are you the name you were given at birth? The face you see in the mirror? The stream of thoughts that never seems to stop? Or are you the silent presence that notices all of it happening? That silent presence is not afraid of death. Only the ego fears death, because it imagines itself to be something permanent. It builds a fortress of stories and identities and accomplishments and says, this is me. But death does not care for fortresses. It moves through them like wind through trees. To free ourselves from the fear of death, we must stop identifying so heavily with the ego. This doesn't mean we discard our personality or deny our humanity. It means we recognize that these are only aspects of our being, not the whole of it. The ego is like a ripple on the surface of a vast ocean. It has form, it has movement, it even has beauty, but it is still just the surface. Beneath it lies something vast and still, something untouched by time or fear. When you begin to rest in that deeper space, the quiet awareness that watches everything come and go, you discover a freedom that cannot be shaken. Thoughts pass, emotions rise and fall, even the body weakens, but something in you remains unchanged. That something is not afraid of death because it never identified with the temporary to begin with. And here's the paradox. The more we let go of the ego, the more alive we become. When you are no longer driven by the need to protect or preserve an identity, you begin to experience life directly, as it is, without fear or clinging. You laugh more freely. You grieve more honestly. You love more openly. Because there is no longer a desperate need to hold on to what cannot last. In this way, death becomes not a threat, but a teacher. It reminds us of impermanence not to frighten us, but to wake us up. It asks us not to build walls around our lives, but to flow fully with them. Every moment becomes precious when you are no longer trying to make it permanent. So the ego may tremble at the thought of its own end, but you are not the ego. You are the sky in which the clouds appear and vanish. And the sky does not fear the passing of any storm. In death, what we experience is not disappearance, but return. Return to the vastness from which we came, to the source beyond names, roles, and forms. We often think of death as a subtraction, something being taken away from us, our thoughts, our body, our relationships, our memories. But perhaps it is not a loss at all. Perhaps it is a merging, a dissolving not into nothingness, but into everything. Consider how a river flows into the ocean. To an observer, the river ends. But does it really? The river doesn't vanish. It joins something larger than itself. It continues as part of the sea, its waters indistinguishable from the whole. Just like that, death is the point at which the separate sense of I dissolves and we are absorbed into the infinite. Not a vanishing, because it cannot comprehend it. It wants to remain fixed, remembered, preserved, but the truth is far more beautiful than preservation. It is union. What dies in death is not the essence, but the boundary. The illusion of separateness we carried like a mask for so long. In life, we walked around believing ourselves to be individuals, cut off from the rest of existence, defined by thought, bound by time. Death gently lifts that mask and reveals what has always been there underneath. Oneness. No borders, no division, no conflict between me and the world. You return not as a person, but as the presence behind all persons, the light behind all forms. This is not something abstract or mystical. It is visible all around us. When a tree falls in the forest, its body is not lost. It feeds the soil, becomes home to insects, nourishes mushrooms, becomes part of other trees. Nothing is wasted, nothing disappears. Every form that ends transforms. And if this is true of everything in nature, why would it not be true of us? To realize that death is a return is to release the tension we carry in life, the clinging, the resisting, the fearing. It allows us to live more openly because we are no longer trying to grasp at something fleeting. We are no longer afraid of letting go. And strangely, this makes life even more vivid. Because when you know you are not separate, you begin to see everything as yourself. The sun, the breeze, the people you love, the silence in the morning. All of it is part of you, and you are part of it. So in the end, death is not darkness, it is expansion. It is not an exile, it is a homecoming. The self does not die. Only the illusion of being separate does. What you truly are was never born and can never die. It simply flows, like the ocean, like the sky, like love itself.